What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Valley coming at you with the one, the only, my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes. We're here to talk about how the three heaviest favorites in the second round of the NBA playoffs are all totally screwed. It's over. They all lost game one at home, and we were wrong. We have to adjust our priors accordingly, and that means they are doomed. Their present is doomed. Their future is doomed. There is no hope. That's not actually what we're going to do. We're going to talk about which one of those three it should be on alert the most as we move forward. Grant, how the heck are you?
I'm doing well. I said this last time. I'm just loving that we've cut the field in half and we can spend even more time focusing on fewer games. That's a great thing. I don't want to, we're not going to jump right into what I think about these games and how panicked we should be, because that's like the bulk of the content here. So I'll tell you, I'm doing well, and I'm not going to ask you how you're doing. I'll say, I hope that you're also doing well. And maybe we should just get started.
I do enjoy, we said this, the fewer games thing. I'd well, I guess it wouldn't be this staggered, but if the NBA ever did cut its number of games during the regular season, it just gives you sort of a preview, no, this would rule.
Yeah.
The Knicks Celtics, which we picked, did we both pick Boston in 5 for this series? I believe
still alive, still in play.
Look, people are already doing victory laps in our comments. It is technically well, yeah, we're rethinking this, but also not technically wrong yet.
Yeah.
I came away from game one basically in shock as to what I just when the Knicks were down 20 in my head. I resisted putting it on social media, but I will save space here. It wasn't just, oh, this game's over. Okay, this season's over. This is as I expected. Maybe they'll steal one, but Boston's not even really giving you their best punch and you're down 20.
Yeah.
What did you make? What are you taking away from this game and as it applies moving forward?
Yeah, I was in the same. I don't know what place other than that you could really find yourself in when the deficit's 20, right? Just the way that it was shaking out. We can talk about some of the surprising things that were apparent even at that point when it seemed like, oh, Boston's going to win every game, walking away. The deficits will always be in the 20s. There's just no way this is going to be competitive. I just think there was real cause for concern because it seemed very easy when that lead was as big as it was, and Boston wasn't playing well, really. There were things that weren't going Boston's way, and it was still just these teams are on different levels. Having said that, I don't know how you walk away from this game without bullet point number one on your here's my analysis being some version of make or miss league. I'm sure you've seen various iterations of the stats. We can talk about Boston's process. The result was they got 45 uncontested threes and they made 12 or 13. I forget what it was.
Yeah, and it was the ones that were completely unguarded. So the 6+ feet away, I think were 24, and they were 7 of 24.
If all you knew going into a game, you're coaching Team X, and I tell you, Dan, your team will attempt 45 threes that will be termed uncontested. You'd say so we won by 15, or what if that's all you knew, you would assume you won with a 90% rate of certainty.
Especially when you go back and look. So in the 4 regular season games that they played, and this is with that 4th one where it was kind of close, but also includes the first one where the Knicks were absolutely drubbed. Knicks were a minus 117 from the 3-point line. So if someone came at you with the stat that you just said, knowing what happened in the regular season.
Yeah. I mean, even what were the Knicks, 17 of 37, I think, from 3. I should know that off the top of my head, but even if you knew that, and you said you were also aware that Boston got up 60 and 45 of them were really good looks, you'd still say, I think Boston still won this by double digits pretty easily, right? I don't want to reduce it to that, because I think that lets Boston off the hook a little bit because of the way not all those threes were, the ones, even though they were not really closely guarded. Boston's offensive process, this feels like we could pull up a clip of us talking about the Celtics and searching for a concern from any point over the last 3 years, and some version of what we're going to say about this game would appear, right? Because the whole settling, getting into your actions too late, not attacking downhill, I think the Celtics also made half of their shots inside the arc. So it's
well, when they actually took them, yeah,
that's the thing. So do that more, maybe. It's all the same concerns or like nitpicks you would make about Boston, those were all just on display. And that is a problem, and it deserves more discussion than just like shot 63s, you're going to make more than that you did and you're fine. Like there's a little bit to talk about here. So take that, or like just where are you on this, like as from a Knicks perspective? Like what positives do the Knicks take away here? Like what can you say other than Boston missed a bunch of shots to say to make the case that the Knicks did X, Y, and Z well enough to win?
I've already requested off for the parade in June. Is where I'm at. I think so. I do want to take because I think that this applies to the Knicks. When you're looking at a lot of the 3-point variability, you don't tend to credit defenses, especially defenses that haven't necessarily proven that they're going to be the reason that you go into some of these shots. What I do think the Knicks did a really good job of doing was, if you go, and I didn't go back and watch all 60 of Boston's 3-pointers. I watched a lot of the makes, and some of those makes were when Boston got New York into rotation and they were scrambling. But a lot of the other times, like their misses were coming when New York, either their rotations early on in the possession were just spot on, or like you didn't put them in rotation at all. And so
there's a lot of switching by the Knicks, right? That surprised me.
That had to be, I'd love to see the data on that. That had to be the game where they switched the most. Like maybe it was one of the other Celtics games early in their season, but with its core. Yeah. And the other thing that I thought they did a really good job doing, so they're in the middle of switching, but like they also did a good job of continuing to, and he had possessions where he ended up on Tatum, but Jalen Brunson spent most of the time on Drew Holiday. And I think unless you want to get, if Kristaps Porzingis is on the court, you might ask yourself, like, is it better to have a big on Drew Holiday? But you can get into that. But Drew Holiday seems like the smartest one for Jalen Brunson to cover. And now you're able to keep him on, because even though they were switching, I think it was a possession in the fourth quarter where it's like Karl-Anthony Towns' screen navigation was insane. So he switches the initial action, but then doesn't get caught off by another screen, and he goes around it and he picks up the guy again. So Jalen Brunson was able to stay on Drew Holiday that entire possession. And that was just, I don't want to say it was the best defensive performance I've seen from the Knicks this season, but in terms of like the variability of what they threw out there and the execution of it, I came away thinking like Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart, OG, all having like that type of defensive game at once. I do think what helped them get there is so Kristaps Porzingis and the illness, like that he is like, when you look at the Knicks roster specifically, he's the guy. I'm not saying he's always going to make his shots, but like he's the guy, the type of big that just breaks it. And it's just so different when one, you're going to have, and they didn't perform particularly well on the glass, but when it's just Al Horford, like it's different because now you don't have the Al Horford and Porzingis minutes. And it's just different when it's Al Horford out there versus when it's just Porzingis out there. You might be a little bit better off if you're Boston wanting to switch defensively, sure, with Al Horford. I won't argue that. But offensively, like Kristaps Porzingis is just more of an anomaly there at this point. So I think that helped them. But I also think what the Knicks did a really good job of doing is like they got after it after Boston's missed shots too. And it was like there were still some possessions where things bogged down. But if you're going to be able to play with a semblance of pace, like Josh Hart really good at setting the pace for them and forcing ball, like, you know, Boston after misses, like going up against their defense when it's not set. No, I don't think they're going to make 17 of 37 from three. So like that stuff will normalize, but it did just give you hope that, okay, there's a blueprint here.
Yeah, I think I see a lot of, allusions to Orlando put the blueprint out. Like speaking of blueprints, like Orlando just not switching against Boston and forcing more isolation stuff, staying out of rotation, all that kind of thing. Oh, the Knicks cribbed from that. I think that's probably true to some extent. But the thing I couldn't avoid thinking, and we've seen it in a few other playoff series, what do you think maybe like, because the idea of like, oh, switchability on defense is like this premium skill, like that's been around for a minute. Like, you know, the Draymond Warriors, those Rockets teams with PJ Tucker at center, both had Harden / Curry as like the vulnerable guy. That's the Brunson role. Keep those guys out of the action and switch everything else. Like that was really more designed, I think, to slow down like a pick and roll or a pick and pop, or just like short circuiting that action that had become so prevalent. I wonder now, and the fact that the Celtics got up as many threes as they did maybe just means this is a theory we can debunk immediately. But I also think like, well, if the goal is to stay out of rotations, switching solves that. And if the reason you want to stay out of rotations is because there are teams that will just fire off threes with no remorse, no second thoughts like Boston does, like that's an interesting trend that I think a lot of teams might employ. Now, Boston's the extreme case because the Celtics shoot so many threes, and that's like what they want is to get you, closing out late to somebody and getting a look that way. But I wonder if as the 3-point like volume just continues to increase around the league, we might see like not a return to, but like a reinvigoration of like, all right, we've got to switch everything. And if you want to beat us in isolation on 2-point attempts, best of luck, because we're going to shoot a lot of threes on the other end. And so it's possible that like, I think game 2 in this series is going to be a phenomenal, like, I don't know, not a litmus test, but like we may get a sense of, all right, how committed are you, Knicks and everybody else that's trying to switch so much? Like, is this going to be a new thing now, where just because we're so afraid of threes being just burying us, like to circle all the way back, you give up 45 uncontested threes, like you can't that can't happen as a defense, like that's a mistake. And so that's the irony of me praising the Knicks switching, having given that up. I'm aware of, but like if you want to get that number down against a normal team that's not Boston, switching might just do that. Like, and at least force, so the best thing I would say about the Knicks is they force Boston to like kind of lean on their worst instincts. And maybe that changes in game 2. But I think the switching thing is going to be interesting to follow, like as a league wide kind of trend. Just let's stop letting teams get open threes because we're scrambling and because we played the pick and roll straight up. Does that make sense? You think that might be a thing?
Yeah, I also just sort of wonder, like, how much of it could become, and I think that applies to this series too, more variability in, even so the Knicks, like, they did play some man in this. And I just, the Orlando blueprint, I understand what people are saying about it, but I didn't see a lot of it in, like, Orlando was running these dudes off the 3-point line,
Right.
which the Knicks were just not doing. So that's almost counterintuitive to think about. I do also think that, and I think the Knicks won this game, like more than Boston. Like it's always a combination of things where I think that maybe this showed that the Knicks do have more punch in them than we expected against Boston, but Boston's process, as you mentioned, was bad. And I think like one of the low hanging fruits is just, I don't know what was going on with Jason Tatum.
Yeah.
Like, were they trying to over course correct because of what happened in the Orlando series? So they're determined to get off these threes, but he goes from averaging about 13 drives per 36 minutes in that Orlando series to he has 7 drives against the Knicks, which when you factor in overtime, that's like 5.5 drives per 36 minutes. This is someone who has the ability to get downhill and not bail out and draw some fouls. And he had like, because the Knicks were switching, like there were moments when Jalen Brunson was on him and just like he bumped Jalen Brunson off him and it was, okay, that creates a separation for your pull-up jumper, but that's not falling right now. Like maybe try to get to the basket at that point. I think that they can certainly do more of that. And that will be, okay, because part of the appeal of Boston is it's not just they have all these dudes that can space the floor. It's everyone on the court basically at all times can dribble, shoot, and pass and decision make, like however you want to frame it. And so they just didn't lean on that. I think the Knicks did a good job of and that I also kind of wonder in that sense if the Piston series helped them, because that was such a physical series and Boston just doesn't play that way even when they're at full strength. But I think like as much as the Knicks gave Boston real trouble, like Boston really kind of just self-sabotaged itself on so many of these offensive possessions.
Yeah. I think you have to do some version of this in every game that flips like game 1 did. But like if I'm apportioning, did the Knicks win it or did the Celtics lose it? I think the larger percentage of that weight is on the Celtics lost it. I mean, just the shooting aspect of it, you said the low hanging fruit that was just like left unpicked over and over again. What was, I know, I can't remember when in the game it happened, but Tatum did hit a deep like isolation step back against the defender he should have taken. It might've been Cat. It might've been Mitchell Robinson, but then like there was the one late with like 5.5 seconds left. I think Tatum did have Mitchell Robinson on him and he shot a deep 3. Like, I think I'll be stunned in game 2 if Boston doesn't, and Tatum specifically, if Boston doesn't make a real concerted effort to just like get downhill and try to finish, because I do think the Knicks are going to stay home a fair amount. That is like kind of the Orlando blueprint, is like, just try to finish. You got to beat us with contested twos. And I think the Celtics and Tatum specifically, and Brown really too, if you get a big switched out, like, or Brunson switched onto you, there's just a lot of ways to get to the basket, and maybe that opens up the kick out game and you get your threes anyway. But it's like I think Boston just needs to make some layups, like, or get fouled, because especially with the Knicks being as thin as they are, like foul trouble matters more for the Knicks than most other teams, because like Tibbs just doesn't want to play a bunch of guys. Like that's another bonus for Boston if it can just quit settling. I guess it's a trite way to frame it, but like that is what it felt like.
And it's, what's also fascinating here is because you mentioned the foul trouble, and I find myself coming away. You felt Mitchell Robinson's impact on a lot of defensive possessions, but they went to Maul Mitch, or what I call it now, Mitches get stitches will be the. And so they went to that. He's 3 of 10 at the foul line, but Karl-Anthony Towns was also in foul trouble.
Right.
Like and they had to go to Precious Achiuwa, and like Josh Hart was on the court when they did that at one point. I was like, I thought this was over. But I don't know, like, how playable do you see Mitchell Robinson being in the series? It does. You would think that if Porzingis is going to be limited or not available, it should get a lot easier. But if you don't think that him playing 20 minutes per game in a regulation, like we're not even like factoring in a game that has some overtime in it. If you don't think he can give you 20 minutes per game, it becomes even more critical to keep Karl-Anthony Towns out of foul trouble, which did not happen for much of game one.
Well, that's the other wild thing. And I short answer, yeah. Like I think if Porzingis doesn't play, that just gives you more options to play Robinson. But like another point in the Knicks' favor, I guess, is that like offensively, Cat wasn't good, and he had his typical like handful of dumb Cat fouls. I think he outperformed expectations defensively, like holding up on switches fairly well. But like to win a game without Cat really being like anything close to the best version of himself offensively, and to have been limited by foul trouble, that's one that's like, that's not in the like, if you're looking up like, okay, what are the examples of like what are the Knicks wins going to look like? Oh, Brunson will have 50, or like the Celtics will miss a ton of threes. Like very few of those hypotheticals involve Cat just having a bad game offensively. You would assume that he's gonna have to be great, and they won a game when he wasn't. Like it's still, I'm not changing my priors, but it's like the Knicks got this one. And so like now they don't need to get lucky again as often,
And there's a level of luck involved at every step, but also does it give you any, maybe it's not confidence, but sort of like you're going to stop and say, well, like maybe I need to think more about this series, because Mikal Bridges and Karl-Anthony Towns did not. I know Mikal Bridges hit a big 3, but they did not have good offensive games.
Right.
And like they both shot like these egregious air balls at one point. Mikal Bridges always seems like he's actively going away from the basket.
Yeah.
And yet you still won. And so I want to throw flowers out to 2 players in this. I mean, Josh Hart was really good too. This is, and I promise Raptors fans, I watched him in Toronto. This is the best version of OG Anunoby that we have ever seen. And it kind of started to creep up before the Brunson ankle injury, but it really popped off after it, and they just kind of never went back. It feels like, his usage is down, not creating as much with Brunson there. 1, but 2, it does feel like they've kind of apportioned some of what would have been the Mikal Bridges usage at full strength back to OG Anunoby. I still don't necessarily trust him as a playmaker, but he had this one finish. Like he has Jaylen Brown going one-on-one, goes to his left, I think it was, and he finishes over Jaylen Brown and through Al Horford. And it's like,
oh yeah, and he finished with the right hand on the left side with like a hang. Yeah,
and
that was just tough.
Like, this is, and then to just be defending Jason Tatum for most of the game, which and this again, I think a lot of this was settling, but you have to give the credit like to OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, Josh Hart. The Celtics averaged 0.63 points per possession on plays in which OG Anunoby registered as like the final defender on Jason Tatum. And so to carry that workload and then do what he did on offense, incredible.
Yeah.
And then Jalen Brunson, I'm trying to think of who are the other players in recent NBA vintage that I've thought of this way. And I think it's probably Dame and Jokic, of where it's just, no, I don't like the Knicks' crunch time process. And I've been pretty vocal about that. But I just expect every shot he takes when it matters most to go in now. And I can tell you, I don't think I've ever felt that way about a Knicks player specifically. Like this is insane. Like some of the shot, I mean, him and Aaron Gordon apparently, right? Like,
right. Well, yeah. I mean, anybody else but Brunson, you would be surprised. But at this point, it's just, it has become the expectation that he's just going to hit the big shots. And this game was he was 9 of 23 overall, but he was 5 of 9 from deep. 6 like he just, he shouldn't be able to keep doing this. Like with the sheer workload that he's had to endure is like, if anybody is like should have an excuse for like he looks a little slow tonight, like it's him. And just maybe him and Steph, I guess, after that Rocket series. But like I agree with you. It's just the expectation should be that he will hit big shots late, and I don't know, maybe we need to reevaluate clutch player, because like that just is what he is, and we can't dismiss it like, oh, he won it this year. So I mean, I think you're encouraged if you're the Knicks for certain. I think at the same time, unless you think from Boston's perspective that like they'll continue to miss and they won't change up some of their process in reaction to this loss, like I don't feel like the concern level from Boston's side, maybe it wasn't high enough to begin the series, but I don't think it's moving up a whole bunch of notches on the scale.
I think you can look at it this way and say there's stuff for the Knicks to clean up. It feels like there's more for Boston to clean up, and they were still in control of the game at one point. That's not to take away from what the Knicks did, but there's first of all, there's no reason to panic after a game one. Like had the Knicks, rationally speaking, I shouldn't declare their season over had they lost game one to a team that is heavily favored over them. You can, because there's justification there, but no, I don't think Boston should be panicking, but I will kind of be looking at, and I don't necessarily see it on defense as much, or even some of his drives, but the Jaylen Brown knee thing, like he was 1 of 10 from 3. And it's like that doesn't all year necessarily hasn't looked the same. So that, and then in combination with Porzingis, I'm wondering if like, okay, is this team just a little bit more banged up than we gave credit for? Even still, like, I think you're going to see a far more complete game from Boston in game 2.
I'd be stunned if you didn't. I think the funny thing is, like, if the Knicks had won this game by 40, I feel like we would more easily write it off as like Boston shouldn't be concerned than the Knicks winning a close game, because it would just be like, well, nothing's valuable from this game because it's just such an outlier. Like weirdly, the Knicks winning a close game that involved a comeback is like more concerning for Boston than if Boston had just gotten blown off the floor, because there'd be all these you trot out all the excuses like they had too much time off, or they just didn't. Weirdly, a tight win that the Knicks fought for and like seized, that's more concerning for Boston than getting crushed.
The final thing, I really do think we need to pour one out for Tom Thibodeau, because in a game that went to overtime, he found a way. He scrapped and clawed to get Mikal Bridges 120,000 milliseconds of rest.
Only 51 minutes played. What restraint?
It's 120,000 milliseconds of rest. That's kudos to. Although, actually, give credit to him. Like, they tried different things defensively. For everyone who wants to talk about adjustments from Tibbs, he did at least do that. Yeah. So we'll see what happens. Sometimes I wonder if like the foul trouble forces, like was that game 1 against the Pistons where Josh Hart was in foul trouble, and so it forced him to make some adjustments. So it's almost like you need to take the club out of Tibbs's bag to force him to try and use something else.
Hey, whatever works.
We're on to, and you should stay tuned towards the end, because we will pick which of the 3 heavy favorites should be most concerned. Thunder Nuggets. I picked, you had Thunder in 6. I had Thunder in 5. I'm seeing a lot of the Thunder aren't ready for this moment stuff after game 1. I also think that we should probably talk about that Chet Holmgren is just a bust at this point, right? Like, how do we do the hot take thing here? What would be like the hottest take coming out?
He's not clutch. He's not built for the moment. What else? There's Nick Anderson all over again. Saw that somewhere. I don't know. So
what is standing aside from, I made the joke about it, like Aaron Gordon just has like, so the Nuggets are what, 8 playoff games deep and he has 2 game winners through it. Like that's incredible.
And like arguably the most incredible game winner we've seen in I don't know how long
hold on. Russell Westbrook passing up the chance to try and get a bucket to give Aaron Gordon the game. I thought he was going to try and like shoot it.
Oh, that was like prime. I'm throwing myself at the backboard and like whatever happens, like vintage Russ, just out of control. So yeah, you're right. He's the real winner, because he just somehow saw a way to give that. And it was a great pat. Like he made the right play.
He made a lot of like his defense in game 1 too. We could say that about a lot of moments during these playoffs, of course, but like they were moving him around on all these different assignments. He's been,
he's a good defender on the ball like that. I think he still makes mistakes a lot, like gambling or just like off ball stuff, but he really is someone, and like this matters. I guess Brown fits into this category too for Denver, but like Russ is really someone you can put on a good offensive player, as long as he doesn't have to like do too much like processing about like off the ball stuff. He's like, he can do that. And as long as he doesn't like shoot you out of games or do a bunch of dumb turnover stuff or over aggressive stuff, like I never thought I'd get here, but like he's a valuable role player. I think I think I finally come around on this version of Russ.
How many years did it take? That's all it took
What year of his career is this? So this is a different situation, I think, than the Celtics Knicks series, just solely because some of the things that went wrong for the Thunder, I guess in a way that's kind of mirroring the Boston shooting stuff, but like the Nuggets were plus 20 on the boards. I think they had 8 more offensive rebounds. That whole rebounding thing it's a little outdated. That was a bigger concern for like past Thunder teams and the versions of them that didn't have centers this year. But to get bludgeoned on the boards and like have that be a pretty significant reason that you lost this game, like that's like you put a little pin in that one, right? I think maybe there's a few other things, but that was the first thing that jumped out to me is like Jokic just playing volleyball on the glass and Gordon getting in there for a handful of extra possessions. And then this was not a high scoring half court offense game for either team, except Denver did really well on second chance opportunities. And I think, if you're looking for something that swung it, like that's pretty close to like option one for me.
Yeah. The thing I also noticed, and not that part of this was, so there are two things. Defensively, I really thought that Nikola Jokic ended up with small players on him like too often. I know that's like OKC's thing, and you were also dealing with some foul trouble to your bigs, which is what Nikola Jokic does. And I know this isn't necessarily their MO, but I'd probably like to, if you're in that situation, and look, this is perfect. We have Alex Caruso guarding Nikola Jokic on the screen card photo. I'd probably like to see you send help a little sooner than we were seeing from them on that.
Yeah.
But
that's so risky though. You send a second guy and Jokic is going to dice you up, that's the conundrum with him.
He diced you up anyway.
That's true.
The other thing too is, I guess, are they looking at it as, so Jamal Murray, like after the first quarter, I felt like the Thunder were throwing more bodies at him. And so it was just like, I guess that worked on Jamal Murray, but is that the smartest approach for your overall defense here? I do think the bigger issue for OKC was they got to be better after they're missing shots on the offensive end. The Nuggets scored 1.16 points per possession after an OKC miss. OKC had the best defense in the league in those situations at 1.07 points allowed per possession through the regular season and the playoffs so far. Like that, there was just a lot of where it's like, why is Jamal Murray so far behind your defense after a miss on a three? Like, even if you want to factor in the long rebound stuff, like that was weird. And that feels like more than, because you can't make Chet Holmgren thicker. You can't make Isaiah Hartenstein any thicker. Like that felt like low-hanging fruit they could clean up.
Yeah, I mean, I think Denver had the best transition offense in the league. And like, but all we do all postseason is talk about like, it doesn't matter because teams will be diligent about getting back. And certainly the Thunder are one that is like, you're not going to outrun the Thunder, on the break ever. That is like, that favors the Nuggets. But I would agree with you that like, I think the Thunder are that's getting cleaned up. I would imagine, like, because that's all going to be really conspicuous stuff that shows up in the film where it's like, see that guy in the white jersey that's like 10 steps closer to the basket than you are. Like, maybe don't let that happen after a miss. Like that seems fairly easy.
Yeah, they were in transition on like 45%.
That's
after
nuts.
misses of OKC. That's they were at 30% for the regular season, which is a good number. To be over 40% is just like, Denver's offense is going to figure out a way to score anyway because Nikola Jokic exists. You don't want to give them those additional opportunities.
Do you think as just in isolation that the Thunder are happy with Jokic taking 29 shots and making 15? Like, just do you think, what about game one? What can game one tell you about like how the Thunder, because it's the old, like, do we want to let Jokic score because we know he doesn't, like, that's not option one on his like programming basically. Like, is it because he had 42, got to the foul line 13 times? Do you think the Thunder want him to try to beat them individually and that's why they played him the way they did, or was this just Jokic like taking what was there regardless?
It sure seems like that's what they want, because you said you wouldn't do this, you wouldn't throw 2 on Jokic earlier.
That scares me to do that.
You don't think that, okay, well, to to just talk about that for a second, you don't think that OKC is the personnel type where maybe you could still
That's the
figure
thing. If anybody does, it's them. And we should say there were moments in this game. I think the biggest lead was 14, but it's certainly in the first half, there were moments where it was like, oh, this is like the Thunder can just create like a level of frenzy that like no other team does. And a lot of that's Caruso. Like he was unbelievable, just so disruptive. And then like the other thing that happened, like I had several moments where I was just like, because we talked about like, did we overthink the Thunder? And is it just like they're just that team? They're so overwhelming. And there were stretches in the first half. Dort steals a Jokic like no look pass in transition, just goes up and two hands it like a free safety. And it's like, I sincerely can't remember seeing anyone ever steal a Jokic pass like that. And so that was just like, well, there's another example of how the Thunder are just different. And there's no way that the Nuggets can win this game. They're going to get they're overwhelmed. And like the Thunder did hit levels where it felt like they were unbeatable. They're conspicuous in their isolation, like how few of those there were, I think.
Did we underthink the Nuggets is now the question that we might need to ask, because
no, because my only thought on the Nuggets is they have Jokic, and so they're good.
Well, they're also I think we've done a good job of not underestimating this in the past, but like they're pretty huge. Yeah. And so like, even if it wasn't a Michael Porter Jr. game, that was clear. Like the shoulder stuff wasn't great defensively. Like Christian Brown and he had some really good straight up possessions on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in this game. Like Shai had some moments where, especially if they weren't throwing a ton, like being aggressive with him, but then we saw them be a little bit more aggressive with him, like when it mattered. And it was sort of the anyone but Shai approach, I think is kind of what it was. But Peyton Watson has really good side. He was kind of all over the place this game, but he had some good moments. Jokic is huge when you're talking about getting rebounds. Aaron Gordon is pretty big. And if you get one or both of OKC's bigs into foul trouble, that size discrepancy becomes even more pronounced. And so I'm re-looking at this series, and I'm not changing any of my predictions. I mean, like, do I think this series is going to go longer than 5 games? Yeah, like fucking obviously now I do have Denver.
Well, I mean, maybe. We'll see.
Well, I do. The thing that I want to get into, because I think like Denver is, what game was it last year? Like, was it game 4? Whatever. They've just flipped a defensive switch. It feels like, to where it's like, oh, like they're going to play, they're going to be able to be physical. They're going to be able to do a ton of different things. Russell Westbrook is going to come out here and just annihilate things. Christian Brown, I feel like, has gotten noticeably better during that stretch. What did you notice about OKC's offense that you think they could do? Because you mentioned, like, did OKC look at this and say, we're fine with Jokic taking 29 shots? Because yeah, he will have nights where he goes 15 of 29. But like you said, it's kind of not like, that's not in his DNA. Like, that's not something that he's probably comfortable doing it, but that would not be what he wants to do first. What did you notice about OKC's offense, though, in terms of how Denver either was defending them, or what OKC did or didn't do, or what was it? Oh, we do need to revisit the problem of what does the offense look like if it's not Shai Gilgeous-Alexander trying to generate it? Or do you think it was more about what Denver was able to do? Do you think it was more about some of the shots that OKC missed? Because I think Denver might look at this and say, Caruso and Dort, huge games from 3. But you could say what you said about the Thunder and Jokic. Yeah, if he scores 40 points, we'll live with that. We're going to try and limit everybody else. If you're the Nuggets, you're probably like, you look at what Shai Gilgeous-Alexander did, had a good line, but like you made life tough on him. And it's You live with Alex Caruso and Lou Dort detonations in that scenario.
Yeah, I think so. I guess like this is another. So in addition to the rebounding issue, I think this is another like, oh no, this is one of the things we were concerned about for a long time, which is just if all you do as a Denver defense is make SGA work, what do you have? 26 shots for 33 points and got to the line 9 times. Like that's not, I think all things being equal, you're okay with Shai getting 33, I guess, weirdly, if you're Denver, but it is just like, what was Jada was 5 of 20. Chet didn't make a 3. Like, I mean, if Dort doesn't go 4 for 9 from 3, you're probably what if he shoots, I don't know, 2 for 9, this game's like not close, maybe down the stretch. And then like, I can't get a whole lot farther than it still seems like an issue against good defenses, which I guess Denver is now at the moment, for the Thunder to get somebody else that can reliably create offense, create advantages, like all that kind of stuff. Like, and even J-Dub had moments where like he had a couple great drives. Again, maybe conspicuous for how few there were, but he had like a hard drive left pull up that just got blocked. It was towards the end of the shot clock late in the game. Didn't really hit his threes. What was he at 2 for 9? It does feel like the supplementary offense is still a problem. And again, like we're not going to overreact. I do think it's like if Chet hit 5 threes in game 2 and J-Dub had 30 points on like 17 shots, like we would just say, okay, that's fine. But it is an issue when problems you foresee arise, because like there's a reason that we've been concerned about that kind of thing for a team as good as the Thunder. Is like it's one of the few things they don't consistently excel at. And maybe the samples of like, well, as long as Williams is out there with Chet or Hartenstein, maybe those samples weren't big enough, and maybe they didn't come in, against playoff defenses that are designed to, kind of exploit that frailty. I don't know. We're talking about a 1-game sample, so nothing smaller than that. But it does. I'm a little concerned for the Thunder. I mean, you sort of have to be.
Who do you think? What would this series here? Because this was like also one of the worst games in terms of watching like two teams finish around the basket when they got there. If that becomes a trend in this series, who do you think that favors? Where it's like this is ugly around the basket. So who ends up better off if that is what ends up happening?
If it's uglier, like it's a struggle inside, like
they're both like shooting like 50, like sub 55% at the rim. I think I'll double check.
I would probably just say that favors Denver, weirdly, because I have visions in my head of Jokic in there missing a short one, getting it back, or tipping it out for an open 3. It's like I think if there's a scrum around the basket as athletic and mobile and stuff as the Thunder can be, I think Jokic is just too big. Like I think that favors the Nuggets in a lot of ways, maybe. Which like also the Nuggets, we've harped on them all year, don't want to shoot a bunch of threes and don't shoot a lot of threes. If you want to turn this into a 2-point contest, I mean that's not the worst thing in the world for Denver.
I understand this is counterintuitive because of Jokic, but that's also why I would, with this OKC Thunder group, advocate of you can cover Nikola Jokic more aggressively than I still don't know how much of that was just all our guys are in foul. All of our Jokic defenders are in foul trouble right now.
Which may be the case going forward all the time.
Well, that's what I want to ask you. What do you make of the Chet Holmgren of it all? And specifically, are you looking at ways to kind of, I do think Isaiah Hartenstein, insofar as anyone did a good job defending Jokic, was clearly better. And even he had his moments where it's, again, you could be a little bit more like, let's not give Jokic like all that space on the above the break 3 that we know he's going to take and probably make because it's one of the in the NBA. But are you doing everything you can to? I've seen there have been some national hours like, oh, is this not a Chet series? And I can't get there because if this isn't a Chet series, the Thunder might not win this series. But like, are you trying to do everything possible so that he doesn't have to spend all this time straight up on Jokic?
It's a fascinating question. I think it could. You might be, the people saying it's not a Chet series might be right if the Thunder are going to have him guard Jokic as much as it seemed like they did in game 1. I just felt like every time I looked up, it was like, oh my God, it's Chet and Hartenstein's off the floor.
Like a sacrifice is on.
So here's the thing. Is that point? Because if you have Chet on Jokic, your first thought is like, he's not big enough. You got to send 2. Well, then it's like from the Thunder's perspective, you've not only sent a second defender, Chet's your best like backline mop-up guy, and he's not back in that spot. So like you've taken him out of the play. So sending 2 at Jokic when one of them is Chet feels like you're asking to just get Aaron Gordon backcut dunked to death, or like Christian Brown open 3 to death. Like that doesn't feel like a viable strategy. So if that's what you're going to do, then if Chet's the lone big, I think honestly, I would rather just have Caruso or Dort try to stand Jokic up on the perimeter and have Chet back, cleaning up messes on the back line. As bizarre as that sounds, but we've seen, remember the Nets against Embiid just had 2 smalls on him the whole game. That's a thing you can try. I would almost rather have 2 wings or 2 guards bother Jokic than to have Chet be one of 2 guys on him or be in isolation, unless the plan is like, yeah, sorry, Chet, you're just going to have to eat this one. Like you're the pitcher that we've taxed our bullpen last night. You're going to have to give up 9 earned runs. And we're not taking you out because the point is to make Jokic a scorer. Like if that's the 3D chess that Dagnall's playing, maybe that's why you leave him in there. But I do think in general, I don't want Chet on Jokic, and I really, really don't want him on Jokic if it means you have to send a second guy. Just because that feels like there's too many compromises being made.
It does feel like if you're gonna not, it feels like it should just be Hartenstein. But that's interesting. I mean, we saw the Clippers do this a little bit when they decided to put Harden on Jokic.
Yeah, you can do it. The Lakers did all that weird stuff, against Jokic this year. I just don't think Chet is the right guy for that because you're taking away a lot of his defensive value if you're putting him on a guy that he can't guard,
And the other thing too is you are then taking away his offensive gravity if he's in foul trouble. To where it's
Right?
just like Isaiah Hartenstein, yeah, okay, like as a screen setter and the stuff he could do in the short roll, sure. But like we even saw, like Jokic will concede those
Yeah.
floaters to Isaiah Hartenstein if he has to. It forces Denver to think more about its matchups, what it's doing defensively, if Chet is just on the floor. And I think that needs to be a priority, is keeping him on the floor, because I think that helps optimize your offense.
How great are the playoffs where it's like the Nuggets could be correct in saying our scheme is designed to give Isaiah Hartenstein the exact shot he wants as often as he wants it, and somehow that's the right decision. Like the tactical stuff is so great where it's like, as a defense, you can concede things that normally during the year you'd be like, that's insane. Why would you give that guy that shot? He makes it all the time. It's like, well, that means SGA is not shooting it, and that means we're not giving up three. It's like there's all these layers to it where when an offense thinks it's getting something good, it's like actually the defense is cool with that because there are worse alternatives to give up. Playoffs are great.
What the final thing on this game, and it's more, I guess, getting out in front of just Mark Daigneault, the fouling up three thing.
Yeah.
As someone, I don't like Mitch's get stitches. I don't like, I don't like the foul. I want that to be like, you can't do it. Like there needs to be something to help prohibit it. My whole thing is just the mistake that they made was fouling when Jokic was out of the game and Denver didn't have a timeout.
100%. I have no issue with anything else. Well, sorry, go ahead. I'm glad you led with that because that is the one that's like, even as I was watching, I was like, you can't do that.
But I'm also kind of I'm not a big believer in stubbornness, but I don't view that, like if this was Tom Thibodeau, it's different. I don't think Mark Daigneault is stubborn in his principles, and it could have just been a miscue. And it's in retrospect, he admitted it. I think even J-Dub, did you see? He was like, "Damn, I didn't even think of that." So
really?
like, yeah. So it was a mistake. But something I always come back to is it's the same thing with the last 2-minute reports. Or if there's one missed call, something happens late in the game. There was 47 and a half minutes of other basketball.
Right.
Like, that's not and like, that's the whole, it's not to me. And I don't like, it's tough to measure, well, how important is experience? And down the stretch, it certainly looks like, all right, the Thunder do not look like a team that has been to the NBA finals together. And the Nuggets certainly do. It's okay to say that, but like, I don't look at this and say like, oh, they're not built. It was a mistake. And if they continue to make them, I'm not a fan of that, because it was a mistake. It was just, Jokic was out of the game. You gave him a chance to come back in. You didn't need to. It was a mistake. But like, I don't know. If they continue to make it or something, but do you assign any sort of value to like how the end of the game folded out in that way?
I would say nitpick. Like I would, if in who knows what I would do in the moment, I'd probably be in the fetal position because it's so overwhelming and scary at the end of those games.
That Jokic is like that. Am I keeping track of? Because it's not. There's someone on the bench presumably that's keeping track of Denver's timeouts. Like, did they make? I'm just.
Yeah. So I think yes, you could be really nitpicky. It's not super nitpicky because it's like, just don't let them get their best player back in the game for an offensive possession. Like that's like, all right, we can agree that was probably a mistake. And to a lesser extent, the just not burning any time before the intentional fouls, like not going for steals for a few seconds. Like
they fouled Aaron Gordon. That was the one they fouled Aaron Gordon, right? Who's like shooting 80+%.
Right.
And you couldn't have tried to get it in someone else's head, like force him to get rid of the ball.
In terms of like the weight I give that stuff, I would say that I think it's more informative to look at the like handful of stretches where the Thunder were just like chaos personified and were dominating the game physically and doing all this. Like that provides more like forward-looking value to me than scrutinizing what the last 12 seconds look like tactically. Like, you know what I mean? Like if you're trying to project forward in the series, like, yeah, maybe we have another tight game like this and maybe we don't. And maybe the Thunder puts the decision to foul or how to do that, or they're not. Like the stretch where they dominated, like I think that's the clip you show in film before game 2 and be like, look what we're doing to this team. Like, look how we're running them out of the gym and just like playing at, we're redlining and they're at like 3,000 RP. Like that stuff matters more. even when you lose. I would say too, like, I think we would be talking about a lot of the same things, but like that Aaron Gordon shot that won it, let's say that's a 40% shot for him. Maybe it's a little higher because he's open and it's a whatever. It's like, even down to the last second before that shot goes in, the Thunder were probably supposed to win, like just based on the math. Like that's not a 51% shot for Gordon. So
Right.
like it's easy to panic and easy to like scrutinize all this other stuff, but like even if you give that up wide open to Gordon, like you still should win the game because he doesn't make that shot half the time. Right. I don't know. Like I think we got to keep a little perspective on stuff like that.
Anything else on this series?
Alex Caruso is a monster. That's all.
That's why you trade for Alex Caruso. Would Josh Giddey have had this game? We're going to talk. So we did already talk extensively about Cavs Pacers game 1. By the time you listen to this, we'll have already seen game 2. So, but we're doing the which favorite needs to be most concerned. I will note, go back and listen to that game 1 episode. I did it with Mort Jensen of the NBA podcast. A bunch of different things. If Grant wants to fire off any takes, totally let him. We love Grant around these parts. Grant, did you know that? We love you around these parts.
I hear it a little too much, to be honest.
But something I'm interested to see the Darius Garland injury, but also, and we're seeing this now, that neither DeAndre Hunter, Evan Mobley, or Darius Garland participated in shoot around in the morning of game 2. And Brian Windhorst, as he says his quote, typically it's not a good sign if you're not participating in shoot around. Now, these are the playoffs and the games. I know you have a day off in between, but like this is like a quicker turnaround for the playoffs. I'm not assigning too much value to it, but if you were, I'm going to frame it like this. If you were, the Pacers won game 1, they are a fantastic team. I've claimed they've been underrated for like 60 plus games now. Like clearly, I think this series might last longer than 5 still. Maybe I underestimated them. But if you're going to be worried about the Cavs, more so than pointing to anything that happened in game 1, might just be like the Darius Garland injury, right? Because it shifts the advantage creation workload most onto Donovan Mitchell and Ty Jerome. Because like that's not really Evan Mobley's game just yet, even though it could do some of it. And it's kind of tougher to do, I feel like, against this Pacers defense specifically. But that's like, wow. I'm going to be very curious to see if they play. I would expect at least 2 of those guys to play in game 2, if we're being honest, but something to put a pin in for sure.
Yeah, it almost puts this series in a different category because you're talking about like, it has injury concerns that like could so obviously swing the result that the other 2 series really don't. I mean, the Celtics have Porzingis's mystery illness and then Jaylen Brown not looking right and Holiday's coming off the hamstring, but like the Cavs like didn't have like the Cavs actually have guys that have not played and that may continue to not play. I mean, like, yes, I would rank that. I would be most concerned for the Cavs because of that, like because it's just, well, if they don't have Garland alone for the rest of this series, then it's like a coin flip at best, right? And if they don't have Garland, and if they miss a game with Mobley, like, I mean, the Pacers should just be favored probably. But I think it's more interesting, and maybe you may have to like, I don't want you to circle back on everything you talked about with Mort, but like injuries aside, if you assume the Cavs will just have their full complement of players and they'll be at or near like full capacity, anything in game 1 that stood out as like, as a Pacers acolyte, which you are, that like really validated your like, I think the Pacers, are really a threat here. Anything independent of the injury stuff?
Yeah, I think it's the fact that Andrew Nembhard is like playoff Jimmy Butler incarnate is a big one.
Some of those threes he hit in game 1, I was like, that guy does not lack for confidence.
I think it is, and this is probably worth a longer discussion about like the state of the NBA in general, but the variability with which the Pacers can play when you're looking at the pace, when you're looking at some of the things they can do on defense, but also the depth to where it's like you can play. I've called it, people who listen to this podcast regularly now, for like the functional depth of you're not just regular season deep. It's you would go to X number of guys in the playoffs. And the Pacers, I think the Cavs are also a good case study in this. I think the Rockets in the last round were a good case study of this, where I'm wondering if that becomes more of a thing to where it's, no, depth is going to be more important in the playoffs, or where you have different guys that are able to like attack in different, like Aaron Nesmith. That's not someone that you would say, he's in it. We need someone who's in advance. Like, yeah, it makes sense that you have a bunch of guys that could do things with the ball, but that's not what he's known for. And yet the fact that you can trust him to make quick decisions, hit threes, put the ball on the floor. He's got these like really heady, like shoulder prevalent drives, while also he'll just defend anybody. He's defending Giannis last series. We saw a bunch on Matt. Like he could defend the motion shooters as well. There's just so many different buttons for them to push. And I think that's what stood out. And if I was looking at this from the Cavs perspective, aside from the injuries, uh, Donovan Mitchell having his second highest usage rate of the season kind of proved like, well, that's how much Darius Garland mattered.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing, and I know part of this is like ingrained in their defensive philosophy, I think they need to be more aggressive on going after like either running Indy off the 3-point line or going after like closing out on their shooters, because there's just too many wide open threes. Like 30% of their threes, Indies, were just completely like 6+ feet away. So not even just open, like wide open. That's too. I know this team isn't, when you look on paper, it's not the best shooting team in theory, but like you got kind of trounced. And that was with Tyrese Halliburton going 1 of 5 on wide open threes. And it's weird didn't really get a Pascal Siakam game offensively either.
Yeah, and it's weird for the Cavs too, because like as many sort of imperfect guys as they have, like a lot of them skew more toward, like Dean Wade is an example, Okoro is an example. Like you should be able to put guys out there that are mobile enough and long enough to kind of shut off some of that, to run guys off the line, I guess, but just to put it really simply, like that, the Cavs should be able to do that. I think like, I forget who, somebody pointed out Mitchell was a little gimpy after something in the second quarter bothered him, and he he just didn't, maybe it was the workload, maybe it was a combination of things, but like he just is going to have to be, because like what version of Garland are you going to get? You can't be sure that it's going to be, I mean, if he's out there at all, it helps a ton just to have another like shooter. You can't leave another guy to pass the ball, make plays, all that stuff. But Mitchell, like, he got his 30, but he had to work way too hard for it.
Well, and that's like kind of one of the trickle down effects of not having Darius Garland there. Right. The other thing too is it did seem the Cavs were like sort of overreactive to whenever Jared Allen had to switch. And I understand like that you don't want Jared Allen necessarily going up against Tyrese Halliburton. Like, isn't the entire point of like your bigs is live with the outcome of that, or no? Yeah. Did you think that like that was sort of, no, the right principle is like, oh, we're going to shade over, like we're going to sag way off. Like Max Strus in one of the situations was just veering so far. Oh, I remember the shooter he was tracking. And I'm just like, yeah, Tyrese Halliburton might get to his floater, but I'm more concerned about him spraying out to somebody for three.
I'm kind of switch pilled now since we've been talking about it so much, where I do think like, as long as Allen doesn't give up the step back 3, and as long as Halliburton, might get by him and get into the lane, I think it's a twofold thing. That's okay, 1, and 2, don't everybody freak out and leave your assignment to come help, because worst case, Halliburton's going to have to make a layup with the mobile and long Jared Allen, like chasing him down, potentially pinning it to the board or whatever. The worst thing you can do is overhelp in that situation and then open up the 3 or the swing 3 that Indiana wants, or swing drive, and it's a wide open layup where Allen's not in the play. Like, I think you got to be a little more disciplined in those situations.
Now let's ask the question: which heavy NBA playoff favorite in the second round? The Cavs, the Knicks? No, I'm just kidding. The Celtics or the Thunder? Cavs, Knicks, Nuggets, Thunder. Sorry, Cavs, Celtics, Thunder.
There you go.
Heavy second round favorite do you think is in the most trouble?
I think it has to be Cleveland, just the combination of the injuries and Indiana just being better than anyone, I guess, other than you gave them credit for.
Well, I know I picked Cleveland in 5, so I didn't give enough credit.
Right. Like, I think if the injuries are out of it, it's a harder question. But the fact that Cleveland has like multiple starters banged up and Garland's already missed a game, like that settles it for me pretty clearly.
I think that's the right answer. And also, I think you can talk yourself into, even if you remove injuries from the equation, there's still a scenario in which the Pacers match up really well with this team. Who would you go second? I kind of feel like it's the Thunder, which runs counter to me saying maybe we all overthought the Thunder. So maybe I'm overthinking the outcome to game 1. But when you see so many of the primary issues that maybe you didn't think, the Jokic thing, you probably didn't think they solved. But like, oh no, like they won't get manhandled on the glass. And like the secondary offense isn't that much of a problem. And then you watch, it's like, oh, okay, maybe we jumped the shark there by declaring them solved. Those issues solved.
And like, I agree with you, but it's also the fact that like we're just the least concerned for the Celtics because they just missed threes. If you really wanted to get maximally reductive, that's what. Like, I don't know. It was a tight game that could have gone either way, and like Boston just won't shoot that poorly again.
If you want to get properly reductive, I would say. So it's not like we're not being too reductive. It's the Knicks played a hell of a game and they still could have, and Boston played a terrible game. They just still could have lost. They were down by Knicks were down by 20 at one point.
Right. Yeah. This was the only. Well, yeah. I think it was the only of the options here that had a 20-point deficit in which the favorite was ahead. So.
It did look a couple of times in Nuggets Thunder though that like the Thunder were gonna run away.
I was convinced in the first half, like, oh, this is gonna get ugly, and just didn't.
You have anything else to say, or you want to take us out of here? But look, let's all best wishes to Grant in this difficult time as he gets ready for. It'll have already happened by the time you listen, but Warriors Timberwolves game 1. He's going through it right now. I don't know if you can see it on his face. This has been. We appreciate him tough. You know, he didn't miss shoot around this morning.
No.
He came in, he did the work, he got his treatment, and he powered through the podcast.
I just rest assured I'll be a different person after game 1. I can't tell you if I'll be better or worse. I'll be different. It will have changed me emotionally. I'm already like emotionally hedging really hard. Like, hey, they got out of the first round. That's pretty good for some old dudes. You know, good for them. I'm happy they
Steph Curry outlasting
that's my favorite
Rockets
thing.
defense at the age of 37 is just he's not the only player that's ever had gravity, but just like a 37-year-old like going through what he did and still outlasting it's wild.
And Thompson specifically, just like, guess who's cramping up first, young fella? Not me. It's gonna be you. That was amazing. Yeah. So that whatever happens from here, Dan, I'm fine. I'm totally fine.
Yeah, I totally believe you.
Okay, good. Thanks everybody for listening, for watching. Hope you're enjoying the playoffs as much as we are. Please remember to rate, review, subscribe, join our Discord. Links for that in the YouTube and podcast description. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. Shouts Frank Ntilikina. Apologies, Jared Allen.